All right, friends, it is good to be with you today for another episode of Before Conference Conversations. My name is Jonathan Page. I am the Director of Connectional Ministries in the Virginia Annual Conference for Innovation and Creativity. And today I am joined by my friend and colleague, Reverend Lindsey Freeman. Lindsey is a clergy person in Virginia who is not only on our General Conference delegation, she's the head of our delegation. And Lindsey is on the Ordained Ministry Legislative Committee. So Lindsey, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So what we do in these conversations is kind of break down the work of the legislative committees that are before our General Conference. General Conference, of course, if you haven't remembered, is happening April 23rd through May 3rd, 2024 in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the gathering of United Methodists from all over the world to make important decisions about how we want to practice our faith, how we want to live in community together and things like that. And so, Lindsey, as we're getting started today, I wonder, Ordained Ministry, one of 14 legislative committees. Mm-hmm. So what made that one the committee that you wanted to serve on?
Yeah, so for 5 years, I served in the Office of Clergy Excellence, and this committee deals with all the work that I did during that time. And I think since coming back to the local church, it's still content that I really enjoy. This committee focuses a lot on how folks become pastors, the relationship and status of clergy, but also how do we care for our pastors, and a little bit of process in there. But it's stuff I'm really familiar with. So I was drawn to it.
That's cool. And you kind of hit on my next question already about what is the kind of legislation that comes into this. And so being that it's ordained ministry in the United Methodist Church, of course, we believe in the priesthood of all believers and that we're all ministers by virtue of our baptism, but we do have this set apart form of ministry and ordained ministry. So folks would not find a lot of stuff about sort of the work of laity in this committee. It's all ordained ministry.
It's all ordained ministry, and all of the legislation that we're looking at, but 5 pieces, all of it but 5, are in the 300s paragraphs.
Okay, in the Book of Discipline.
In the Book of Discipline, that's kind of where they live, and then 5 are in the 600s, talking more about big picture things like Board of Ordained Ministry, district committees, things like that. So most of it is kind of the on the ground, how do we support people wherever they are on the journey towards licensed or ordained ministry.
Okay, very cool. And anything in the Book of Resolutions?
We have 1 in the Book of Resolutions, and a lot of the resolutions are timing out, especially with a extended quadrennia. So we want to re-up some of those as well. Yeah.
And in a lot of our legislative committees, there's some non-legislative pieces that are a part of what we're reading and looking at. I know in ordained ministry, there's something called the Study of Ministry Report. Yep. Anything you'd want to share with folks about that?
Yeah.
Putting you on the spot?
No, it's good. So that kind of starts our section in our book of legislation, and a study commission was tasked to look at ordained ministry. What do we believe about it? What's our history say about it? And so they did this study and just kind of looked at all these different pieces, and then they wrote a report called A Sacred Trust, that ordination is the sacred trust of clergy, as a part of our call, as a part of our work. And lay and pastors alike, I encourage you to read this because it does challenge some of our current structure and even language we use for certain roles. And they're not proposing a change in how we do boards of ordained ministry or anything like that, but it is calling us back to more historical terms when we talk about elders or deacons, when we talk about licensed local pastors. So for some folks, it might rub you the wrong way, but it is kind of sparking questions and thoughts about, how might we do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine some of that report then informs some of the proposed legislation that you're reading.
Yeah. And I think at the end of their report, there's some legislation, but there's also a request for the next, they have in the book 2024, but here we are. But for the next General Conference, I think with some real legislation around implementing change.
Got it. So as you've been looking through the many petitions that are a part of your, off the top of your head, do you know how many petitions are there?
No, I should count them.
More than 2.
Oh, yes. More than 2, for sure.
Less than like 2002, though.
That's
yeah,
right.
Yeah. So
somewhere in between
2
there.
to 2002 petitions, good. Have any stood out to you as like, wow, this would be a real needle mover if we did something like this?
Like in a good way?
In whatever way you want to take the question. Sure.
So I think the way I've been prioritizing things a little bit personally as I read it is urgency,
Okay.
what I'm calling
Sure.
strategic urgency.
Sure.
In the 2019 conference, when the traditional plan was put into place, certain things were deemed unconstitutional, and so some of the legislation is making those provisions back in place. Case in point, administrative leave. If a pastor is deemed ineffective and we need to take action, that was deemed unconstitutional, but we really need a way to assess and handle those situations.
Sure.
So some of the legislation is coming through, like that to me feels urgent. Like, let's make sure it's right. Let's make sure it looks good. Let's work on that. And the same with just resolution. If a complaint is filed, how do we handle that with the most grace and compassion? And so those feel urgent to me. Again, I think the Sacred Trust, the study commission is provocative just because we're so tied to what we call certain things and how we view certain things. And it's really, I think, what Holy Conferencing is about. It's inviting us into theological debate and thought. And so that feels like a good exercise, not just the law, but
absolutely
a theological moment.
Yeah. And being able to just engage in them. That's one of the beautiful things about the legislative committee space is certainly that's not going to be all of one mind. Right?
Correct.
But being able to offer theological rationale and trying to listen to one another and have that space seems like it's pretty crucial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I wonder, so preparation for General Conference is a real thing. We're first-time delegate?
Yeah,
right?
first-time delegate, yeah.
First time, long time. So I wonder for you, what's it been like kind of getting ready for this moment and this time? And especially, I think you and I have talked separately. You're not alone in this. You've been working with some folks. Can you talk a little bit about your preparation process? And what that's
like? I think for me, it's a little bit of, it's a little bit twofold of preparing to lead the delegation and being mindful of that work and that as a sacred trust for my role in that way. But then I think for the committee, of course, the reading, shout out to Leanne Taylor, who's reading with me and has served on the board of Ordained Ministry for a long time. But also joining with people, mostly U.S.-based, via Zoom over the past couple of months. And we did this in prep of 2020, but obviously halted. But meeting via Zoom and saying, what are we prioritizing? What are people reading? What are you seeing? And even what are you hearing that how this legislation is landing? Because obviously someone might hear it and say, I thought you were talking about this, when really the intent was something else. And that group has been really good and allowed us to kind of focus our work. And someone in our delegation recently said, hey, when we know who our siblings are outside of the U.S., can we fold them into those conversations? Of course. Which is a great reminder.
And just as a reminder, people who are listening or watching, we're doing this in mid-February. And so we're hoping by the time this gets released that maybe we will know a little bit more about the global composition of our delegates. Just today we don't. And that's part of the deal. So you talk about that work of prioritization. So these legislative committees, tight window, right? We've got just a couple days to get through all the work. Do you have a sense of how you all are going to prioritize the work that's ahead of you? Yeah,
I think we'll have a good amount of things that will go on the consent agenda of, hey, we don't need to kind of hash this out. But I do think just resolution complaint process will take most of our time just to make sure we get it right. And then I think as our legislation can speak to overarching themes or meta themes like regionalization, I think this group is committed to that. Like not doing harm, I think this group is committed to that. And so how we can best align our legislation to those greater themes is a big priority.
Of course. And that'll then play into some of how we set agenda moving forward when we get to plenary spaces and how I think in previous podcasts for those longtime faithful listeners, we've talked about some of those themes like regionalization, like removal of harmful language and that sort of thing. And it's a reminder that those aren't legislative committees. Those are across the common threads that kind of go through everything.
Right, cut across, yeah.
And so kind of stacking it in a way that enables that to happen becomes a really big part of the work.
Yeah.
As you think about that work, I mean, you spoke to being the head of the delegation. This is going a little bit off the script for the legislative committee, but how do you just what is that like to be sort of at that lead position at the table with that stuff, and how has that influenced your perspective just going into the work of General Conference? Yeah,
so I think as a part of that role, I'm in other spaces with other heads of delegation. And so while those spaces may not be about the legislative content, I'm learning a lot about folks who've served in this role for a long time, and kind of how they prepare themselves, mind, body, and spirit. And I think it helps that I know our delegation really well. They're people I've served with and known for a long time. And so it's like when you know your bench, you know who to tap, you know who to go in, you know who's going to make the fadeaway shot. Let's go Duke. But in all seriousness, you know the people and who you're working with. And so it really becomes a team approach, and I'm able to relay information or bring information back. And it's just kind of this smooth, work that we're doing.
And that's something probably really good for folks listening to this to know is that head of delegation role, you're the first elected clergy person. And so that's how somebody gets to be in that role. But you really, at least from my seat, you're the conduit between Virginia and the rest of our denominational connection. Do you feel that way? Is that kind of the space that you're occupying in that role?
No, I think that's a good way to say it. And I think the main way I've seen it play out is I can take questions from the delegation and be a conduit to try to get answers, or even disseminating information down. But I think conduit's a good way to put it.
So when we get to Charlotte, we're kind of in that space. What do you anticipate your rhythm being like while you're there? Kind of how do you envision working through kind of both the legislative space, the plenary space? What's that going to be like for you?
I'm really looking forward to the first week because you are in your legislative committee. So it's going to be a good number of people, but you're really investing in that group and that work. Right. And so it feels kind of micro to start off with. It'd be a lot to start in the plenary the first day with everyone. And because a lot of this work is really about relationship. Absolutely. And so cultivating relationship with people that I don't know or maybe just know by name. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And I think in terms of rhythm, it's the basic thing. Stay hydrated. Make sure people are laughing and trying to take care of themselves. I mean, just things that I know keep my spirit up.
And plus, they're going to have great stand-up comedy there the whole time, so it'll be really easy. Yeah,
I wish. So just being mindful. I think being mindful of my mental capacity, physical capacity, just because it's a lot of hard work.
Absolutely,
it's a lot of hard work.
Well, and I think one of the things I sense for folks in Virginia is that folks are going to be looking to prayerfully support you, support the whole delegation. I guess as kind of a closing thought here, are there specific kinds of ways that you would hope people are praying or supporting as we engage this work together for General Conference?
Yeah. Pray that we would speak the truth in love. Pray that we would be gracious with one another. And, I think pray that God's will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. I think our delegation is is hopeful and seeking a reflection of God's kingdom.
Yeah.
And so I would pray that our work does that as to the best of our human limited ability.
Yeah.
And that we would be in tune with the Spirit. So those are some things to pray
Amen. Amen. Lindsey, we always give the guests the absolute closing word.
Gosh.
I know, pressure's on. I fade into the ether. Hunter will edit it, so I'm just like not even here. And anything you'd like to share.
What a time to be a United Methodist. And through it all, I give God thanks for that.
Amen. Amen. Well, thank you so much to Reverend Lindsey Freeman for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
We will be back soon with another episode of Before Conference Conversations. As a reminder, if you want to chime in, if you want to be able to think about how you engage in this conversation, how you are preparing for General Conference, don't hesitate to visit our conference website, vaumc.org/GC2024. We'd love to be in touch and be in connection together as we engage in this holy and important work. So, Lindsey, thank you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again real soon.